What's up everybody, Unrested here, and I thought today I'd try and make a video while I'm walking home from work and see how it goes. I'm holding the camera nice and high, just like Busan Kevin taught me. He said, Scott, if you're gonna film yourself while you walk, you gotta hold your camera up in the air, looking down at you, because if you do the opposite way, everybody's gonna be looking up your nose. And that's sage advice, Busan Kevin, thank you very much. Anyway, continuing on, as I'm heading home, you can see I'm winding my way through a labyrinthian neighborhood, and this is pretty typical of most neighborhoods in Japan. I think one thing a lot of people don't realize is that they always think that everything is close together and small in Japan because Japan itself is a small country, but actually what makes things even more compacted and put together even closer is the fact that not only is Japan small, but the actual amount of land that can be built on is really, really small. And that's due to the fact that most of it is so full of mountains that things just can't be built. Anyway, continuing on, I thought today our subject could be about transportation as I walk home right now. Now, transportation in Japan has many different facets, and there's obviously many options when you get here. Probably some of you are already familiar with how good the trains are here, and I'm sure most of you know that Japanese trains are almost non-stop, perfectly on time, and there's rarely ever a situation where a train is late, unless of course someone has committed suicide on the tracks, which unfortunately does happen a lot. So I guess let's go ahead and start with that. Let's start with trains. Trains in Japan, they run like clockwork, and to the point of being almost never even seconds late. They will rarely ever be a minute late, and the only train line I've ever seen problems with, and this is just Osaka, a lot of the same train lines exist because they're actually companies and not government organizations in Tokyo as well. So Osaka's JR line is the only one where I've had just trains totally not show up, and I'm guessing that's because they just are having problems for the day, and they'll just unfortunately just delete the train off of the list of trains showing up for the day and not really even give a reason. So that's probably the only train line I'd say you need to be a little bit wary of and just check during the morning to make sure that it's actually going to show up. Other than that, anything else that you're going to take, especially local trains, one of my favorite, the Midasuji and Tanimachi, which I use constantly here in Tennoji, those trains are non-stop, impeccably on time, and it's great, and I love to take them. And recently they even just put together a new train for Midasuji, so not only is it always on time, but it's really clean now again, which that's another thing, is trains are usually always very clean. Now, I'm not saying that the trains are necessarily brand new looking, but they're always kept very clean. And if you ever lose anything on them, they're really good about checking with the lost and found and returning to you anything you've lost. You can even lose your wallet and you will probably find it again if you go to the lost and found. As far as getting directions, one of the big surprises is that here in Osaka, where it's kind of a major city, you actually do get people who speak English. So you can actually ask for directions in English if you are just visiting and obviously not fluent in the Japanese language, which is really great. Moving on here, let's go ahead and switch subjects over to things like bicycles, cars, and buses. Okay, so using a bicycle is great. I personally don't really like to use them too much because I don't want to have to deal with finding a parking place for one, and I honestly enjoy the exercise I get from walking everywhere. When I first got here, I got a bike, and one of the biggest problems I encountered, I'd say, with having a bike is that you need to park your bike in an area where it says parking is allowed. It's made pretty obvious by signs which actually show, the international sign for no across through the bike, and it's usually labeled in areas you can't. And I promise you, at least here in Osaka, if you do try to park your bike in those areas, you will unpleasantly be surprised to find that it is probably gone by the time you come back to it. Trucks will come and pick it up. This is a legit service that is like a towing service. It'll take your bike away, and you will then probably have to pay anywhere from 25 to 50 bucks to get it back. And you have to figure out a way to transport it back to it, and it can really be a huge hassle. So If you are going to get into a bike, which they're actually quite cheap out here and very reasonable, I would highly recommend you know where you're going to park every day, even if you have to pay for bicycle parking, which sounds ridiculous, but is sometimes something that is totally needed to be done. The next thing we have is using the bus, and the bus, I don't know. I can't really say I'm a big fan of the bus in Japan. Now, across the board, buses are not on time, I don't think, in any country, and this is due to the factor of traffic. So for me to criticize anybody being on time for a bus driver is actually pretty harsh, because especially in Osaka, where the traffic can bottleneck in the blink of an eye, you can't really expect anything to be on time as far as that. On top of it, you're going to be dealing with kanji that you've most likely never studied before. Even if you're a hardcore kanji benkyo shitai type person, you're not going to probably know most of the kanji on there, because they use kana that's similar to the rare kana you would find in names. So that makes it even more difficult. So yeah, buses, not always the best thing to take, but if you're really good at kanji, and I really shouldn't say those who, study real hard can't even read it still, it is possible, but I'm just not very good at it. I've never been very good at reading kanji. Like I said, I can speak Japanese, but I cannot necessarily always read it. So I've always had a little bit of trouble with the bus, and like I said, it's not always necessarily on time, which is not really the bus driver's fault, more of traffic's fault, which there is a lot of in Japan. Finally, cars. I get a lot of emails about cars, and I promise you one day I will eventually make a drifting video, because I actually do have a friend who really is into the drifting up into the mountainsides of Japan, where a lot of cars have those kind of little conventions and stuff like that, and I will make a video of it one day, but for right now I haven't had the time. Nonetheless, getting your Kuruma no Menkyo, or driver's license, can be a little bit difficult if you cannot read Japanese. You can take the test in English, but what I've heard from people who have taken it in English, and I'm talking about the written part of the test, is that the actual Japanese has been translated in a way that is like Google Translate or Babelfish, and I don't know if you've done a lot of translating through those, but sometimes some of the translations you get are a little goofy, and unfortunately that's the same type of thing you're going to get on the test, is really goofy translations that you won't necessarily be able to make sense of, and that's coming from other native speakers who've talked to me about trying to take the test. They said they actually couldn't pass because the English made no sense. As far as the driving part, you will be doing that in Japanese, but it's not really too hard. If you want to know a little bit more about getting your driver's license, you can actually talk to Tokyo Sam, who has his driver's license and has actually taken the test. So if you're really super interested in that, maybe he's the guy to contact, because I love to use the trains and will never ever get a car out here. As for the last but not least, walking everywhere is great. Pedestrian traffic in Japan is extremely easy to navigate. There's tons of sidewalks, tons of places to go, and for the most part you don't really deal with a lot of crazy drivers, because they expect there to be a lot of pedestrians on the street. Of course, you do need to obey traffic laws in Japan, and as we need to obey them, the drivers usually obey those, and unfortunately this can lead to people who, if they think they can dodge some of them, end up getting really hurt. For example, walking out in front of the street when the walk sign is red has led to many people being hit, because nobody will slow down for that. They think it is my right to go. They're not looking for anybody to actually be walking in, because they do really expect that if they're following the laws, you're following the laws. So, it's a toss-up. Who's right and wrong with that? You can decide for yourself. I really feel like it's, important to obey traffic laws. Anyway, that's transportation for today. I'm sure there's some stuff I missed, as always, but if you have any questions about anything you saw today or any parts of transportation, as always, feel free to write. I'm Unrested. This is JFAQ.